Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so very much for joining us here at our second live and hybrid event at McNally Robinson. It is genuinely delightful to see actual human people in chairs at the moment, so thank you all so very much for joining us. I also know we do have a large number of people on YouTube watching right now as well, so hello to you folks now and in the future. You'll notice, I say speaking to spectral figures off in the digital distance, that you may participate in the chat as you see fit. We will see your comments, so please do feel free to join in and say whatever you would like, politely, over the course of the evening. McNally Robinson Booksellers is located here in Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We are here tonight to celebrate the launch of David Bergen's new novel, Out of Mind, published by Goose Lane Editions. This evening will feature a reading from David, followed by a conversation hosted by Chris Hall, who is my boss, which means that I have to be on semi-professional behavior this evening. And this is, of course, presented as part of Thin Air 2021, the Winnipeg International Writers Festival. This is the first of a few of these hybrid events that we'll be putting on with our friends at Thin Air, so please do watch out for forthcoming events as well. Just a few very brief housekeeping notes before we get to the infinitely more interesting portion of the evening. We do ask that you all remain masked while in the space. You'll just notice that the speakers, once they actually get behind microphones, will unmask and then immediately mask up once again when they leave in stealth-like ninja style. There will be a book signing afterward. So at the close of the event, while Charlene Deal from the Winnipeg Writers Festival is talking to you, we'll just ask that you all remain in your seats because that will allow us to transport David to the seat immediately beside our cash desk. Charlene will be out to tell you more. And finally, there will also be a Q&A portion. So please do prepare some questions mentally. When it comes time for the Q&A, I will wander around, not to pass you a microphone, because the idea of passing a microphone around to various strangers seems a little bit ill-fitting, but simply to repeat your question into the microphone for the benefit of all those gathered here and all of those watching at home. But that's more than enough for me. I'd now like to turn things over to tonight's host. Chris Hall has been a McNally Robinson bookseller for 25 years. And has owned it in part for the past 10. When he isn't reading, he loves to travel and cook, and he lives in Winnipeg with his partner and his 2 daughters. Please join me in welcoming Chris Hall.
Hello, everybody. Stealth-like ninja fashion, hey? Oh my gosh, ready for that? So yes, thank you and welcome everybody. We've missed you. It's been a long time. I have to get my glasses out. So I'm very pleased to get the chance to speak to David Bergen tonight about his new novel, Out of Mind. This is his 10th novel to go along with 2 collections of short stories, and that means I've been reading him for more than 20 years. I think of him as a master of the sentence. Everyone finely crafted and shimmering with insight about what it's like for us as human beings. I first met David many years ago, and I remember when I met him, he asked me if I had any authors I'd recently discovered that I could recommend. And I paused to think. Just before I could say Javier Marias, he burst out with, I just discovered the Spanish author, Javier Marias. And I realized he was the one who was buying the Javier Marias novels I was bringing in for the store. And we've discovered shared enthusiasm for lots of authors since. David has won numerous prizes for his books, including the Scotiabank Giller Prize for Time in Between. He is a repeat finalist for the Giller Prize, for The Matter with Morris and Hear the Dark. And The Matter of Morris also made the shortlist for the International Dublin Literary Award, and that's one of my favorites. He is also a 4-time winner of the McNally Robinson Book of the Year Award, and that's no small thing. If you haven't read David's books before, you should. I recommend every one. But if you have, then I know you're looking forward to hearing him read some of those beautiful sentences. So let me get out of the way and introduce you to David Bergen.
Thank you, Chris. Does that work? Okay. Thanks to all of you for being hopeful and coming out here, and lovely to have everybody out there in YouTube land. You are the studio audience, and so you're the one, but I'm not David Letterman. Here we go. The section of the novel I will read from takes place in Thailand. The main character, Lucille, has traveled to Pattaya, a coastal city, to find her daughter, Libby, who has joined a group of young women who are led by a man named Shane. Lucille is concerned. She first calls the group a club and then a cult. Libby has warned her that she shouldn't be alarmed by the long blue jean dresses and the braids and the uniformity of the members. And of course, this alarms Lucille. In this scene, Lucille has made her way to the compound and is looking for her daughter. In the morning early, she left her hotel and walked over to the compound and rang the bell. No one came. She rang again and again. She called out. Finally, the lock went back and the gate opened and a young girl stood before her. She had the sullen face of a child who has just been dragged from her bed. Lucille said that she was Libby's mother and she would like to talk to her daughter. I'll have to ask, the girl said. Will you do that? And while you're at it, tell Shane I'd like to see him as well. Oh, he doesn't usually take visitors at this hour. My name is Jordana. She ducked her head shyly, as if by giving her name she had crossed a forbidden boundary. It's my daughter I want to talk to, Lucille said. Please find her. Jordana walked away, leaving Lucille by the gate. Beneath a tamarind tree in the yard, there was a single metal chair. Lucille sat down in the shade. She was already sweating, and it was barely 8 in the morning. She heard people eating. She heard voices. She heard the chatter of children, but it was all inside the walls somewhere away from her. She saw no movement. And then Libby appeared. She came out of a doorway far back in the compound, and she walked towards Lucille. She walked slowly, her arms at her side. She was the same, only thinner, still striking, her sharp nose, her wide mouth, the dress. She was barefoot. Mother, she said, and Lucille stood and approached her and hugged her. Are you okay? Lucille asked. Of course. I'm so glad to see you. Well, you didn't answer my texts, Lucille said. I thought you'd been kidnapped. Libby laughed. She went up on tiptoes and touched Lucille's cheek. She said that there was no Wi-Fi. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Lucille said they would go for breakfast now. Libby said that she was just sitting down with the group. Lucille said that she wanted to be alone with her. Libby seemed afraid, or maybe she was embarrassed of the imposition of her mother, who was throwing a stark reflection onto her existence. It would be difficult. Lucille recognized this. She took Libby by the hand and said that she had no intentions, only a conversation. I've come all this way. We might as well have breakfast together. Libby smiled. Your voice is shrill, she said. I brought your things, Lucille said, what you asked for. Libby said that she had been in a state, asking for tampons and underwear as if those things might make her happier. Well, underwear is underwear, Lucille said. It's not about happiness. You're still the same, Mom, aren't you? A materialist. Really? Lucille thought, was that how she was seen? She who spent her days weaving through the mind was a materialist? She'd never heard that word in Libby's mouth before. I want Shane to come, Libby said. Lucille said that if this was what Libby truly wanted, of course he could come. Libby said that she didn't know anymore what she truly wanted. Lucille sat Libby down on the chair and walked towards the area where she had seen the 3 girls the day before peeling potatoes. She found a group of women sitting at the long wooden table in the dining room. She asked if they knew where Shane was, and one of the girls pointed towards the kitchen. The other girls offered dark and confused looks. She found him standing in the kitchen eating some sort of green sauce mixed in with rice, lumps of broccoli as well. She didn't know it was him at first, but she did know because he was alone and he was in the kitchen. And this was where she had been told he was, and there were no other men in the room. And she had seen a photo of him previously in which he had been standing with Libby on the beach. And so she knew it was him. In the photo, he had been clean shaven, and now he had a beard, and this made him look older, something graceless and forced in his manner. She knew this kind of man, had seen him in the therapy room. He was usually a talker and hid his anxiety by feigning a meditative stance, not a winker, certainly. More a sleepy, wrinkled, creased smile and a soft voice demanding the listener lean forward to catch the words. She was being too harsh. She didn't know him at all. She approached him and said that she was Libby's mother and that she would be taking her daughter out for breakfast. He said, of course, and he set down his bowl and reached out a hand. She took it. He was strong, and he did not just touch her palm, but held it for a while and then let it go just at the right moment before discomfort set in, her discomfort. I'll join you, he said. Lucille said that it would be just the two of them. He asked if this was what Libby wanted. It is what I want, Lucille said. Shane was leaning against the sink. His arms were crossed and he was wearing a white t-shirt. He had no hair on his forearms and they were tanned and muscled and tattooed. Tattoos on his neck as well. Lucille had a theory that tattoos were a cry for attention, an exterior response to an unfulfilled interior. Libby had said something about what Shane was or where he'd come from, and Lucille hadn't asked. Had said nothing about where Shane was or where he'd come from, and Lucille hadn't asked. It was humid and hot, and he seemed unaffected by the heat. Lucille was sweating. He was smiling, looking her in the eye. His teeth were brilliant. He spoke with a slight lisp, which made him softer and more vulnerable, and this had an appeal. He said that when Libby first joined the group here, she had been confused and lost, but in the last while, she had blossomed. She was stronger now. She was healthier. Her face glowed. You must have noticed a difference, Dr. Black. Lucille had no good answer to those proclamations. She wanted to say nonsense, but she only said, Lucille. Please call me Lucille. What he called her appeared to be of no consequence to him. He was watching Lucille intently as if she might be a painting on a wall, and it was his job to interpret that painting. His eyes didn't leave her. She looked down at her hands as if they might be offering her advice. He said that Lucille and her daughter were isomorphic. He had learned this from talking to Libby and from their therapy together, and when Lucille walked into the room, he saw it immediately. You have physically even the same gait, he said, and internally you are both independent, fiercely so. It's fascinating, don't you think, how this works? Lucille said that they would be back in a while, and she turned and walked away. In the hallway, the girl at the table who had directed Lucille into the kitchen took her arm and said that Libby had gone back to her room. She kept a hand on her arm and guided her down a hallway to a doorway. As they walked, the girl said that her name was Essie, and she said that she was perceived as one of the rebellious ones in the compound, as was Libby. She said that Shane was most fascinated by the women he couldn't control. She said that she planned to leave. Shane had wanted her, she had rejected him, and now he wanted Libby. Here was her room. A bare space and a single bed on which Libby was sitting. Her small backpack, a few clothes hanging from her nails, an overhead fan that turned slowly, not a book to be found, no photos. Gone was the girl who had always set up a home wherever she landed, laying out a few special objects, her favorite novel, postcards. Come, Lucille said, it's all arranged. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you, David.
Thank you,
Great.
Chris.
So March 11th, 2020, we were gathered here for a launch of a book called Hear the Dark.
I know it's weird. It's like bookends. It's
Yeah.
That was the last day before the shutdown of the world.
I was going to ask you, it's the second last event we had here. This is now the second event we have going into the new.
I know I was aware of the synchronicity.
How did you time this so well?
I didn't plan it. But it's nice to be here.
Oh, great. Thank you. I think the obvious place to start is Lucille. Obviously, the main character in this book, but also the partner of Morris from The Matter with Morris. The two books are 11 years apart, publishing-wise. What made you go back to Lucille?
Good question. I had no intention of writing Lucille's story when I originally wrote The Matter with Morris. The Matter with Morris was a standalone book. I was interested in the character Morris Shutt. And then 2 years ago, as novelists tend to do, you cast about for characters and new stories. And I thought of Lucille. Maybe it had been niggling at me for a while. And then I decided to explore who Lucille was, because in The Matter with Morris, for those of you who have read it, you know that it's Morris is a greedy character. He takes up a lot of space, and his voice is all over the place. And Lucille in that novel, who has a small role, remains small in that novel, although she is a bit of a foil for Morris. But I thought I needed to be more than a foil and see who she was and figure her out. Now, one's a man, one's a woman, so it took a different approach.
Yeah, well, I was curious. When I read Matter with Morris, I reread it before this, and my impression of Lucille wasn't entirely positive. She was like a voice of reason and almost too sure of herself. In this one, I liked her a lot more, but she was a lot less sure of herself. So I was wondering, like, there's 7 years, I think, between the novels and novel time. What changed in her, or what is the difference?
Well, I think the difference is not so much in the characters as the character that you're getting your information from. So you're in The Matter with Morris, when you see Lucille, you're getting it from a limited view, and that's Morris's point of view. Now, of course, I wrote the dialogue for Lucille, and she was certain, but maybe in comparison to Morris, she seems certain in that particular novel. But you also, I would think, of course, she's changed over those years, 8, 9 years, and is still, not surprisingly, grieving the loss of her son. But to go back to the original question, I think it's a matter of point of view, and that we are getting it through Morris's eyes, just as in this novel we're getting Morris through Lucille's eyes, and it's not necessarily pretty.
Well, it wasn't a Matter with Morris either.
No, okay. That's true. There were people who had a little bit trouble with him, but yeah, that's good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't need to like every character.
No.
Some of them are more interesting when you don't. Yeah. In reading this new novel, I was thinking a lot about certainty. And then I went back to read Matter with Morris, and there's a line in there where his therapist, Dr. G, challenges him. He says, you believe too much in certainty. Certainty doesn't exist, or something like that. And so I was thinking about that, and I, like, we live in such an uncertain world. And yet if you go to social media, everybody seems so sure of themselves. Like, are these different people? Are you capturing your characters and they're not those people who are sure of themselves, or is it different times of their lives or different times of their days? Or
I think that Lucille would agree with Dr. G that certainty doesn't exist, and those who think that it does are deluding themselves, because there is, I mean, I suppose the one certainty is death, but in that space that you have to live your life, if you're looking simply for certainty, that's going to be difficult to find, and you're going to be at a loss. In Lucille's case, that's probably why she's partly out of mind, is that she too probably, even though she wouldn't agree that certainty can be found, we all want some certainty, and Lucille in her case is seeking that as well. But Lucille's a thinker, okay, so Morris believed that he was a thinker, but he followed his heart. And Lucille is certainly, I think, in some ways smarter and more of a thinker and more reasoned than Morris was, but to a fault, perhaps, because then she hives herself away and closes doors to relationships that maybe would benefit her, or she's afraid of vulnerability.
Well, and she, in the opening paragraph, it says she's enjoying the anonymity of being in that Hong Kong cafe, and by the end, she's lost her identity, or at least her ID.
Yes.
So there's no progress. Like, is there progress? Do we even want progress?
Well, yeah, in the perfect world, in a certain world, we want progress. I think there's definitely progress in Lucille, and losing her ID, having it disappear on the train, the TGV going up to where she's traveling. That is probably where she has to face herself. I'm anonymous. I don't have ID. I can't look at my wallet to see what my name is. I can't look at a picture of myself. And so she has to turn interior so the exterior is gone. So she has to go inside. And I'm not sure if she gets all the way there, but I think a little way.
Yeah, absolutely. And she also faces that in the middle of the night, which had me thinking of Hear the Dark.
In what way?
Well, because at 3 a.m. you kind of face yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, Hear the Dark was about those moments and those times. And there's some events like losing a child, and I was wondering like what aspect of getting older is involved in this too.
It's huge. It is huge. Her children are grown. Well, one died. One daughter has a son, Jake, who's about 12. She has some contact with him. Libby has left and is gone overseas to find herself. Dropped out of school. So she lives alone. Morris is no longer with her. She does have an occasional lover called Carl, but there too, she won't make herself vulnerable. She only sees him on Fridays. And
it's comfortable
and won't go out for dinners with him. Yeah. Right. So she does have a certain amount of control in her life, but maybe doesn't realize that she's a little bit out of control. So yeah.
Libby, she's very interesting. Off to find herself, as you said. I was struck by she has 2 affairs with men called Shane.
You noticed that?
I did.
Yeah, that's very good because that's very good because I didn't notice that.
Oh, I see.
And I should have, because I went back and I was looking at The Matter with Morris and I said, oh wow, that's Shane, and that's very good. And there's some subconscious sort of thing going on there. And Shane, of course, rhymes with shame. And
there's a Freudian slip somewhere.
Yeah, there definitely is. So I can't even say that was intentional. But
it was very effective.
You're the first person that has said to me, there's 2 Shanes and they're both her lover. Yeah, even the mother, even Lucille doesn't say that.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Because Lucille didn't know, because I didn't know.
She can't know more than you.
Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah.
I mentioned in my introduction, I've been reading you for 20 years. And earlier this year, I was reading the new book by Kazuo Ishiguro, Clara and the Sun.
Yeah.
And I've been reading him even longer, 25 plus years probably. And it struck me when I read his book, and it struck me before with him. I don't read his books in isolation. I would not be able to review or judge a book in isolation, because when I read him, I go back into that world, and he's got a style and a set of concerns and things. And it struck me as I was reading this that it was the same for you, that as I go in, there's a David Bergen world that's evolved for me, created for me. And I'll confess, I have it associated with a color.
What color is that?
I don't even know what that means, but it's the color of your shirt.
Oh,
it's
blue,
like kind of dark blue, almost
blue.
black, the color of the middle of the night.
Oh,
and it's reflective and gives that kind of time. But I was wondering, like, as an author, and you're going back, you're now writing your 12th book, as I said, instead not your first, second, third. How different is it for you do you re-enter the world in that similar way, or do you recreate it from scratch?
Do you mean, do I re-enter the world of the dark blue color?
That's mine.
that I've made, and I mean, I suppose, I mean, that makes sense that you would see. I like that you see a color, a dark
David Bergen color.
Yeah, at least they didn't go completely dark black.
No, it's not quite dark.
Yeah, there's possibilities there. I don't pretend to think about my previous books or the stories I've told, or except in this case where I had to go back and look at The Matter with Morris and make sure I didn't make any mistakes, except for the Shane. But I don't return to the novels to think out, okay, how can I imitate what I've done previously? I mean, perhaps the voice is the same, if we even know what we're talking about when we're talking about voice. although I do remember at the age of 33, when I wrote my first, no, I must have been at the age of 31. I wrote my first short story that got published, which is quite late. And I realized when I wrote that story, I thought this is going to get published because it's really damn good. You know, I said that about previous stories too that didn't get published. So, and then when it did get published, but when I was writing the story, I thought, oh, I think I found something. I think I found a way to tell a story. So maybe what you're recognizing is the manner of the telling of the story, because Kazuo Ishiguro, if you look at Remains of the Day, and then you move forward through his work, he's very, very contained. He's very subtle, and he's not gonna hit you over the head. But
and you can't trust anything.
No, exactly. Yeah, you'll never let me go. Right. Yeah. And so his sentences come in waves at you, but you have to be careful as you read them. So I think you have to. Each writer has a certain style that they sort of depend on to tell a story.
Yeah, no, there's a consistency or something, I guess. Or but I would also argue that there's an evolution, because when I went back to Matter with Morris, I was struck by the impression, I guess, that there were more sentences in the service of plot in Matter with Morris, whereas
than there are in this one.
Yeah. And also Hear the Dark, that it's so much more interior and
this one
reflective.
Definitely.
Well,
because it I wanted to go into Lucille's head, and I didn't necessarily have the title at the beginning, but I thought it's about her mind and how she opens her mind, she closes her mind. And so if it's about her mind and they're always inside Lucille, then you're not going to have a lot of plot. Right. You know, you're not going to have like there was in Here the Dark, where a lot of stories were very plot driven and more action. So the action is all in Lucille's head, and she's really talking to herself, even though she's not talking to herself. But that's the sense that I wanted to give.
Well, she's sitting quietly, drinking a glass of wine.
Yeah, but it's a bit of a trick, and it's hard to do. It wasn't necessarily the easiest novel to write in that sense, especially structurally, because if you're in a head of someone, then where's the structure coming from? Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, and yet she's traveling, like she's actually covering a lot of ground.
Yes, she is.
And moving a lot.
Yeah.
So you've got that going on too, but that's almost background, or
I guess maybe that's the one impetus of the movement of the geography, which perhaps moves the story along, but you're always inside Lucille as she's moving through the world. It was actually my editor, Bethany Gibson, who found the structure for the story that I couldn't figure it out at first, and so it was really brilliant of her that she found it, which is unusual for me. Usually I have the structure, boom, I got it, but this one I didn't.
And this would be a new editor too.
Yes, it was
with a new publisher.
She is, yeah.
And you just hit it off, or she understood?
She is smart.
Good for her. Yeah. Because I said that with Hear the Dark too, because we're big supporters of Goose Lane and Biblioasis. They do great work under the surface, or under the radar, if you will. And but they've got some good editors and publishers working there too, don't they? Yeah. So The Matter of Morris makes kind of overt reference to books. Plato and Cicero and Petrarch, and then I mean, it goes so far as to have, I think, or the electronic version that I got from the library had a further reading recommendation, which I don't remember from the book itself. But this one's doesn't have that overtly. No. There's a nice little moment where the book she recommends to a patient is Family Happiness, right after a reference to Tolstoy.
Yeah,
very nice. And were there other books you were thinking of or inspiring this, or?
Well, you know, I have to admit that I had just read Rachel Cusk's trilogy, and I don't know if you caught it, but Lucille at one point says she's reading a book, and it is Rachel Cusk. But one of my blurbers for the page. Yeah, Paige Cooper. So I'm sorry, Paige. Yeah, great writer. She noticed the reference to Cusk, and she was very, very, very clear. Oh, you brought in Cusk into this novel, and I don't mention her, but the trilogy by Rachel Cusk is a very interior stories.
Yes.
Those are very interior stories as
Right.
well. But in her trilogy, she uses Faye as a narrator who, well, she uses Faye as a character who listens to other people. You never get much of who Faye is. And I wanted something different than that. I wanted to actually reveal who Lucille is, and also I wanted something to happen. I wanted some movement. So, but that would be one of the one of the series that I used as a sort of a. I mean, we borrow from everywhere, right?
For
so
sure,
it's
yeah.
but that was very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and very interior. Like that
Mhm.
book is
Yeah.
in the head of
Yeah.
the character, and
Yeah.
and it's called autofiction too,
Yeah.
which is a big movement. So that's interesting that you're using some of the same tools, I suppose, from autofiction to tell a story, but it's not autofiction.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not autofiction.
It's fictional autobiography.
Yeah. Yeah.
You drew on books, and I know you read a lot of books. Where else do you go to think through these thoughts? Do you have music or art or travel or
Yeah,
renovation?
That's a really good question, because when I put out a book, editors will sometimes say, give us your 10 favorite songs. and do you listen to music while you write? Or and usually they want something more pop cultural stuff. And I have to admit that I'm very narrow. I think I like listening to music. Absolutely. I like looking at art. I'm reading a book now on art, but if I'm making fiction my sort of goal, my career, I go to fiction. I read novels, I read short stories, and perhaps I'm certain that limits me in some way, but that's the form I stand by and I go to. And I have nothing against music. No,
of course
no.
not.
I sang in a choir when I was a young boy.
Well, then
Yeah.
Lucille goes to a concert that in the book and it's quite striking how much it
Oh,
means
yes,
to her.
yes. And that's a classical concert in Paris. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But you've traveled extensively, and that must
Oh, yes. Traveling.
inform it.
Yeah. And you did mention traveling, and traveling has definitely informed my writing. I mean, I probably wouldn't have written about Thailand if I hadn't lived in
I
Thailand.
wondered. Yeah. Okay.
So that definitely informed the like where she's sitting by the pool and she has an experience of the heat and overhearing a conversation in Thai. I use what I experienced myself and put it into.
So is it important for you to have been to a place to be able to write satisfactorily about it, or
No,
no?
not always. Not always. In fact, the book ends, there is a section in Marseille, and I've never been to Marseille.
Good for you.
So I did Google Map at one point. Like I wanted to know,
You can cheat, right?
I know that's a cheat. I did want to know, if she walks down this street, what does she see? And you can of course go street view, and you can
Right. It's so much more fun to go.
Absolutely. But you know, couldn't travel.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I know. I probably shouldn't have said that. Google Map it. My goodness.
No, I've heard a number of authors in the last little bit say they visit museums online. And, because they can't.
I mean,
they
if
can't
you
do
write
the research the same.
I mean, if you write a historical novel, you're certainly not going to, go back and meet.
That's true.
Yeah, Tolstoy.
That's true. Well, should we open up the conversation outside to people out here? John, do you have any questions?
Well, the only thing I will mention is, just as a reminder, if you folks do have a question, please just tell it to me and then I'll repeat it into the microphone. If you are watching on YouTube, such as Paige Cooper, who says that everything is okay, David, please do feel free to write a question in the chat.
God.
Thank you.
That's the trouble. We weren't thinking of the downsides of being out on Zoom at the same time.
No, and
It
my
used to be so
and
private.
my daughter did say that Paige was going to listen in, and yeah. And I would put in a plug for her right now, that she wrote a great collection of stories called Solitude. Yeah.
Yes, we have a question over here. David, did you find any particular challenges writing as a woman?
Good question. Of course, that's always a challenge. I would not be so presumptuous to say that it isn't. But I've also written when I was younger from the perspective of an older man, and so I think, and an older woman as well, the age of hope. So I think that it's a simple, it's not so simple, but it's a matter of empathy, of observing, of trying to write it, and finding out if it works. And not only does it work for you, but having other people read it. With this particular book, I had two female readers who were about the same age as Lucille, and got good feedback from them. One was my wife, Mary, and then another was Ellen Karlinski, and so there was really good feedback, and so those are things that where you want to get it right. I'm not sure you can always get it all right, but I've for some reason I've written a lot of women. Here the Dark had a novella with the main character as a woman. Stranger, yeah. The whole book.
Do you feel like the stakes are higher to get it right?
I think in some ways women are more interesting.
Sure.
Yeah.
But if you're wrong, you.
Oh yeah, if you do get it wrong, then and also not that a male can't be interior in the same way, but I think it may. I mean, if you look at Morris, who's exterior, and Lucille, who's interior, I think that is perhaps a reflection of the gender. Not always. I'm not. I don't want to put my foot in my mouth here and
back you into a corner.
I'm already in a corner. I can feel it.
Bonnie from the YouTube chat was wondering, now that you've had the experience of bringing back a character from an earlier novel, would you do it again?
Actually, the other day I was thinking about this particular novel in relation to the matter with Morris. John Updike wrote a tetralogy, 4 books, which dealt with a character called Rabbit Angstrom, and he did it every 10 years. And then I thought to myself, okay, so I wrote this one, Matter with Morris, 10 years ago. It was Morris. 10 years later, today, I wrote Lucille. 10 years from now, when I'm 74, it'll be Libby. And then, so I did entertain that thought, but I can't imagine doing it at this point. Yeah, but there have been characters that I've brought back in short stories, but I've not this is the first time for a novel.
Are there any more questions at all? Ariel Gordon asked the impetuous question, what are you working on now, David?
Well, Ariel, you had to ask that question, eh? Yeah. Well, I'm working on a Russian novel. And it's when I talked about historical novels, I think I'm trying to figure out now how to do that, because I'm going back in time. And so it's a fascinating process. The material is incredibly rich. The material is so rich that I don't know what to do with it sometimes. It's so big but you can. The good thing about going back in time 100 years is that you can do that, and nobody's going to come and accuse you of getting it wrong, except for historians who get it wrong all the time. Exactly. So it's I just call it my Russian novel, Ariel. But thank you for that question.
So the Tolstoy reference was a foreshadow.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Wow. Well done.
Yeah. I actually rereading some Tolstoy, and it's amazing. Yeah.
When I mentioned earlier our confluence with Javier Marias, and Spanish authors have a tendency to go back to my point, I'm going to insist on this, I guess, that they create worlds, and they have characters that reappear in each other's, in each, like you'll read a book and you'll think, well, that's a character from, but they don't do anything particularly special.
And they don't seem to have any problem with that.
No.
I mean, Roberto Bolaño does that all the time,
absolutely.
and it does it so effortlessly.
I know, and so like there's something going on in this next novel that's quite dramatic to it, and then this character from another novel crosses the street. And then goes away, and it's but you feel like all these novels are kind of subtly connected.
And I think that might be the European influence, or the South American influence, like Borges. You know, I think that they just have they have a greater sense of play. I would love to be able to do that.
Yeah, I know. I find it fascinating.
Yeah,
world building.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Since it's only been a year and a half since your last book, did you find writing during COVID any different than before?
Yeah, certainly I did. I have to confess that this particular novel, when I said I couldn't travel for this novel, I wrote it before.
Well, there's always that, isn't there?
I had actually finished this novel in 2019, maybe even 2018. And it just sat for a bit, and then COVID came along, and so I haven't really written anything during the COVID period. A short story, maybe, that Russian novel that I'm working on, and it's been tough to write during this time. But maybe it's just it would have been tough regardless, but my excuse is that it's because of COVID. But if you need an excuse for not writing, but yeah, so I haven't, I don't know what other writers are doing. I haven't talked to them, and if they're succeeding at producing something. But I mean, it's interesting because it shouldn't be that way. So many writers during the Second World War, in the midst of Germany or Paris, were writing brilliant books. And it wasn't about the war, right? You know, they were writing something completely separate from what was happening around them, which I admire that.
I've heard a variety of authors, or a variety of responses from authors. Some of them, I mean, on the one hand, you get all this time, there's nowhere else you can go. So you're right, but on the other hand, it's like the biggest distraction.
It is. Yeah, the news is a distraction. The Americans are a distraction. I would want to say, I don't know if we're going to close soon, but I just want to say, if you do want to know, get some good book ideas, Chinese writers, Latin America, just, talk to Chris.
I've discovered I've been here for 25 years.
Yeah.
Do you know that this store has been open for 25 years?
That's great. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
We're going to celebrate in October, but I just find it mind-boggling.
Yeah. So anyway, it's always fun to talk books with Chris.
Yeah. It's always a treat when I see you in the store. We always get swept away talking about books.
Yeah.
That dovetails nicely with Bonnie Gautier's question as well, which is also about writing during the pandemic. But I will move on to the next one, which is from Hillary Bergen, who has a question for her dad. I feel like you often give small gestures and physical details to flesh out the people in your books. Do you see your characters moving spatially through the world?
Oh boy, Hillary.
That's a tough one.
A tough question. Spatially through the world. I mean, I don't do physical description. So I don't know if that's what you mean, Hillary, but I don't describe characters if they have a long nose, if they have big ears, if they're bald, or if they have long hair. There might be a quirk that I'll describe, but typically physical description for me is not that important. And I've always wondered, if I would ask two different readers, what did this character look like, what they would come up with as far as drawing goes. But to move facially through the world, I should have you right here talking about this and ask you the question. So I do have the physical though. So I'm not sure where the physical takes place, is if it's how they bang up against the physical world. But the actual description of the character is not there, but how they move through the world is definitely there. So it's sensual. I'm probably interested in the sensual movements of my characters. And
I know how they're dressed.
do you?
Yeah, because you talk about clothes a lot.
Oh, yes. I do talk about clothes. I like to talk about food too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got to have a snack beside me.
Yeah.
I do have a clarification from Hillary. She
Okay.
mentioned-
Follow up.
No, she means body movement, as in she stood on tiptoe.
Oh, yes. There's definitely physical movements that way. There's the, or when Libby touches her face, Lucille's face with a hand. So yeah, there's do I know I'm doing that? Good question. Good question. I suppose let's say a physical movement like Libby touching Lucille's face is a definitely an indication of what their relationship is like, who Libby is, the physical contact. So that whether it's subconscious or not, I must be doing that with intention. Yeah.
And we have another question from the audience, and then another one online, and then I think we can wind it down after these two.
All right.
When you're writing, is it visual for you while you're writing, or is it more in the words, such as a character touching their cheek, for instance, as you mentioned?
I don't know. I don't know, because I'm not aware when I'm writing of what I'm doing necessarily. I mean I know what I'm doing, but I don't think to myself, okay, now I'm gonna use the words to I think there's a combination of the two that they blend together, and that probably will require a conversation over coffee, Ellen. Yeah, I'll think about that. Yeah.
Perfect. And we can close down with this question from Rob, who has a two-parter for you. How much do you think your idea of Lucille changed between your first writing of the character and this one? And did writing about her feel at all like a conversation with a previous David Bergen?
Oh my God, these convoluted questions that I'm supposed to have answers to.
You're supposed to be able to make stuff up.
I'm supposed to be able. I should just
You
make
just make stuff
shut up.
up,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So I definitely changed Lucille. She was a bit of a cipher in the matter with Morris, and she behaved in a certain way. In fact, when she goes for lunch with Morris at the end of the novel, she's wearing lots of bracelets, and Morris notices them banging on her right wrist as she's shifting. Now there's the physical part, right? And she has an exterior that I've created in the matter with Morris, and perhaps I took away those bracelets and all that banging and then the noise, and I went inside her and I made her less exterior. So definitely I changed her, Rob. As far as the David Bergen part at the end of the question, I'm not sure. Lucille is not David Bergen. David Bergen is not Lucille.
That's certain.
Yeah, that we think it's certain. Although I do like clothes.
Okay. So,
Yeah, I do like clothes. Yeah.
and the color choices reflect your books.
No, they reflect your idea.
Yeah,
of the
that's true.
books.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that brings us to the end of the Q&A. I'm not sure if either of you had any closing words before we invite Charlene Deal from the Writers Festival back up to the podium.
Well, I would like to thank you, David. That was fantastic. What an opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
smiling behind my mask. Wow, isn't this amazing to be back together in this place? Yeah. Thank you all for coming tonight. This is our first in-person event for Thin Air, for 2 Thin Airs. I feel like I might cry because it's just so extraordinary to be able to gather together to hear, you know, writers and readers really thinking deeply and talking thoughtfully about what they do, what they are sharing, where they take us all as readers, what kind of gifts they give. So, oh wow, I actually am getting all verklempt over here. So a huge thanks to you, David. I'm thrilled that we could be part of the launch, and a huge shout out to you, Chris, for making it possible for us to gather in this space, and to John, who's been running up and down in spite of his neocitrin fogginess,
Right.
and making this all possible. It's amazing that you've come. I hope that you'll come back again. Next week, we are actually meeting here on Tuesday night, and I get to be in Chris's chair, and Kristen Whitman, who I see hiding over there behind her mask, is going to be launching her new poetry collection. I'm really looking forward to that and to that conversation, which will be wonderful. If you haven't had a chance yet to visit the festival, we've kind of had to change gears a little bit because, as you know, we couldn't do anything together last year. So we do have this really lively destination website, I call it, which is basically a large gallery of recordings by our writers who created original content for us. We've got at least 60 writer profiles up there, I think. And there's all sorts of readings and conversations and a few surprises. And it's open. It opened on Monday, and it will be open until October 18, and you can just go any time of day or night. So if you are one of those folks who has odd working hours or dire insomnia, or you need something to do at 2 p.m. with your coffee, please do head over to thinairfestival.ca. We'd love to have you there. And all those writers who made their magic on their iPhones and computers in the summer would be really so happy to be able to share their work with you. I think it's been one of the things that is so hard about the pandemic. And I'm so glad you said that, David. It's really been quite impactful for all of us to figure out how do we continue to be in relationship with one another and to be making things and sharing ideas when we can't gather. So thank you all for coming tonight and showing good faith in the chance to be together and in this incredible bookstore, which I believe needs a huge rousing round of applause. It's been 25 years for you here, Chris. I can't imagine this city without this extraordinary place. It's like a cultural hub for all of us. And I'm still getting used to being here in person. I'm a little trembly about it, but I can see that you have taken good care of us, and I look forward to all the rest of the events that we have here and to the things that you've got lined up for the next few months, which is great. I do want to make a quick mention, a thanks to Goose Lane Editions for supporting this evening, but also really helping this beautiful novel come into the world. They do great work. I recommend even just going to the Goose Lane catalog, and just all sorts of great stuff there. And now I'm supposed to do the not talk here forever. I'm just so happy to see all of you, but I'll get down to business, which is, so here's the protocols here. So I know John earlier said, the ninja thing, and I don't know, here's what it is. They're going to bring David to the signing table. It sounded earlier like they were going to carry him out in like a jute bag or something. So I imagine he's going to go to the signing table on his own muscle.
I think so.
Imagine so.
Yeah.
We're okay.
Yeah.
So he'll be beside the signing table, beside the cash desk. So please purchase the book and then line up to get it signed. And the store is closing, I believe, or maybe closed.
What day is today? 8. Yes.
Okay, so is it 8? I don't know. I forgot to wear my watch.
Sure.
I'm used to being at home, in my sweats. So I'm not part of this part. So, but please do observe the mask mandate and keep some distance when you're in the store. This is, you know, how we respect one another in these social spaces. Yes. Is there anything else apart from thank you for coming? And I'm so grateful that you're part of the festival. And we are really so grateful to be part of this partnership. And Ariel is making noises. What is it? The festival website is free. Yes. And all the events here are free. A lot of stuff is
That's good
free.
to know.
Practically everything is free. This is good, right? Except for the books.
Except for the books.
I'm sorry, you have to pay for the books.
I'm sorry. I'm going to
Buy the
kibosh
books.
that.
Thank you all for coming tonight. And it's great to have you here. We'll see you here on Tuesday. Good night. Stay seated until
Oh,
David
yes,
is
until-
spirited out.